From Indus Business Academy, Bangalore. This is Nagendra Hegde signing in. Ladies and gentlemen, what a day we are having today. We just have concluded the Margadarshak Divas celebration. Professor Mithaleshwar Jha, to let you know, this is a day, 18th of September, when our late founder chairman Shri B.M.L. Jain was born. And we commemorate his birthday as Margadarshak Divas, and we take an oath of treading the path that he has tread in fact. What a coincidence that we have Professor Mithaleshwar Jha, retired professor of IIMB in marketing, with us today. And what a pleasure to have you, sir, on board here amongst us. And coincidentally, sir is also a recipient of Shri B.M.L. Jain Lifetime Memorial Achievement Award. So we have bestowed upon this particular honor on him in last Marcon 2020, held during January 2020 at our institute in Indus Business Academy, Bangalore. Now I would request, my colleagues have also joined with me here. So if I can have Dr. Vaishali Agarwal, if you can switch your video on, followed by Professor Smita Gaikwad, followed by Professor Narendra. So all of them have joined me here in welcoming you. So now I welcome Professor Smita Gaikwad to formally welcome you all and all the attendees. Professor Smita Gaikwad, over to you. Sir, if I can ask you to switch on your video as well.
Okay, I think I can.
Hello. Sir, can you hear me?
Thank you. Yeah.
So if you can switch on your video for a while. Yes, sir, we can see you now. Great. Now I welcome Professor Smita Gaikwad to formally invite Professor Mithaleshwar Jha and all attendees. Ma'am, you're not audible. See if you're unmuted, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ma'am, please see if you are unmuted. Must be a connectivity issue at your end. Ma'am, can you hear?
Hegde sir.
Yeah.
Might be disconnected, sir.
Oh yeah, she's now on. Ma'am, can you hear us now?
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, can you hear me?
Looks like you have a connectivity issue.
Hello. Yes. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes. Sorry for the inconvenience. It gives me an immense pleasure to introduce Professor Mithaleshwar Jha, Professor of Marketing, retired from IIM Bangalore. Professor Jha, along with Philip Kotler, is the co-author of the highly acclaimed Marketing Management Textbook. He is also popularly known as the Bible of Marketing. He has a postgraduate degree in management from IIM Ahmedabad, also served as fellow there. He has served as a faculty member in leading management institutes like IIM Lucknow, IIM Institute of Rural Management Anand, and XLRI Jamshedpur. Professor Jha's teaching is renowned in the subjects like social marketing, product management strategy, relationship management, rural marketing. He has published a number of articles in leading journals. He has served as a consultant with Swiss agencies and Canadian Hungry Foundation. He has also conducted training programs for companies like Kirloskar, Tata, Hyundai, Reliance, Ranbaxy, Berger Paints, etc. Having served as board of member in IIM Bangalore, IIM Lucknow, and Gandhi Peace Center, I once again welcome you, sir, to the online platform for sharing your knowledge. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. And just tell me, by about 4:40 we close?
Yes, sir. We can close by 4:40 or maximum by 4:45. Then we can actually have question and answer session for another 30 minutes.
Fine. Okay. So let me begin. Basically, my agenda is these are difficult times, and some of us are enjoying this time. In fact, I am getting used to this. I'm basically a lazy fellow who managed to work for 38 years and then realized that what enjoyment leisure is. Okay. So I'll begin with certain things that one has observed, and this period also gives one time for introspection. Then I'm sharing briefly the characteristics and challenges of our markets, the current. Mind you, people are saying that we already results are yet to come, and the way economists define recession is if in 2 consecutive quarters GDP's growth is negative, we call it a recession. But in my understanding, recession is a mindset which entered our mindset much before this data came. So we'll spend some time on that what kinds of issues faces and how do we deal with. I have been an advocate of sustainability, and I believe we have been preaching this in management institutes and elsewhere that all problems are opportunities. I think it's yes, it brings difficulty for many families, and one has to look with a different kind of, but it also offers a amount of opportunity for a country like us, which in my opinion was treading a wrong path for a long time. So issues on sustainability are close to my heart, and I'm going to repeat that. Yeah, I think I have shared with you earlier also on one occasion. And
your voice
what
is
I'm
distorting,
calling will
sir.
conclude.
I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry to intervene here. Sir, your voice is distorting. Maybe you can switch off your video so that we can save the bandwidth there. Probably that would be coming between you and the quality of the voice.
Okay.
Maybe you can switch off the video. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, better, sir.
Okay. So basically, I'm ending with during and post-COVID manifesto because one doesn't know when this whole thing will go, right? There are all kinds of predictions. So one needs to look at what we need to do in the short term and then what we need to do in the long term. That's the basic agenda. This proverb I have been hearing for almost last 30 years, and I never understood the real meaning of this till this COVID happened. This is a Chinese proverb, they say, may you live in interesting times. And I used to wonder, is it a blessing? Is it a curse? What does it mean? Professor Hegde, is the voice clear now?
Sir, if you can come a bit closer to the mic, closer to the speaker.
Okay, now is it better?
Yeah, it's far better. You can stay on there, sir.
Okay, so basically a nation which popularized this phrase made the world experience its meaning. So one doesn't know that it was manufactured in a lab or it's a natural kind of a disaster, which could have happened anywhere. But basically it's a Chinese proverb, and all of us are to go through this, and we are living in interesting times. to business students and faculty and others, whosoever is in the audience, I do not know, because many a times we do not look at business history, and unfortunately in management institutes, it has not got the respect that it should get. So I'm not too sure how many of us are familiar with this company called Montgomery Ward Company, but at current times, there is a huge lesson for all of us. While we are, as I said, likely to enter recession, or we are almost in recession. Currently, everybody knows that Amazon and Walmart are fighting with each other for retail dominance in US and maybe in the world. I hope some of us will remember the predecessor to Walmart in terms of leadership position in retail chain in US was a company called Sears Roebuck. And before Sears, Montgomery Ward was the market leader there for a long time, more than 100 years plus. And the motto of this company, see, long before Xerox made customer satisfaction a science, because in the current scenario, Xerox gets credit for developing a whole lot of customer satisfaction related measurements and other things. Motto of this company, this retail chain, Montgomery Ward, was satisfaction guaranteed. And at least Ahmedabad Library had a book by that title, Satisfaction Guaranteed, and I had privilege of going through it. This company made a very interesting assumption. When the Great Depression happened in the world, and I hope some of us will remember that 1928-29 onwards till the end of Second World War is called that period of Great Recession, Depression, whatever we call it. The whole world economy was shattered, and people are expecting that similar kind of a scenario may happen courtesy of this monster. I hope it doesn't happen. Now, at that time, Montgomery Ward made certain business assumptions. They assumed that this situation is likely to prevail for a long time. And mind you, why I'm spending time on this is currently many of our businesses are making the similar assumption. So they started retrenching people, they started selling off, closing their stores, they started selling off properties, they stopped virtually advertisements, all kinds of hard cost-cutting measures. Sears at that time was a distant number 2, nowhere close to Montgomery Ward. Sears management took a view that this situation may not continue for a long time. Number 2, they said, right now property prices are at the lowest, virtually at the bottom. People are in distress. So this is the time to selectively buy better locations, which Montgomery Ward and some others are selling off, whatever we can afford. They also took a view that when times are difficult, if you retrench people, you lose their loyalty forever. So they said, okay, let's take a cut because nobody can sustain the kind of salaries that we have been giving in the past because we don't have incomes of that level. But let us retain jobs. And selectively, they recruited some of the best that Montgomery Ward and some others had retrenched at lower compensation because people are willing to work at whatever was being offered at that time, but they treated their employees with respect. They cut down on their advertisement and visibility, but maintained a certain degree of visibility. 1945, when the Second World War ended, people who analyzed this scenario, they said, Montgomery Ward by that time was in a perpetual decline, and Sears Roebuck was virtually on the takeoff stage. By somewhere around the 55, 56, I'm again saying from memory, but around that time, Montgomery Ward got sold off, broken into pieces and sold off. That's how when you become bankrupt, it happens in that country. Sears became number 2, became number 1. Mind you, Sears made another very critical assumption, and what I am hinting at it, one, in recessionary situation, and there are several other examples, Sears was not the only example, how somebody managed, how somebody behaved in a different manner because the business model was dependent on a different set of assumptions. So for management students, the learning is all businesses, and more experience we have, more those kinds of assumptions run on certain assumptions. Now, critical assumptions that we make about our businesses have long-term impact on our sustainability and growth. The second part, people say nothing succeeds like success. My learning is in success, failure is embedded if it leads to arrogance. Again, you will have several examples in our country and elsewhere in the world currently. Sears was victorious. Sears had a huge growth, but they made an assumption that Sears kind of large format store cannot be sustained in populations less than 50,000. So if you look at Walmart's initial growth in US, Walmart grew in smaller towns where Sears had given them a free run. There were other small players. Once they gathered momentum and they gathered resources, they took on Sears. Sears made another mistake of trying to upgrade itself when challenged by Walmart. It lost badly. Now, currently, if you look at the game which is happening, Walmart made another mistake having won this game with certain different kinds of assumptions that so-called digital and these online stores cannot give competition to large brick and mortar formats because customers like the feel, touch, the so-called, there are shopaholics who like to visit the store and they smell it, they feel it, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to spend time on that. It's history happening today. And both have reached a stage where they say that yes, combination makes sense. So basic issue I'm highlighting is in difficult situations, if you make positive assumptions, it helps. Yes, there is dearth of money, everybody is in trouble. So typically I use the family analogy. And let me use this. I will not name the company. We were dealing with a large multinational company which had offered a huge VRS. And this company used to take pride in saying that we are a family, very paternalistic kind of a company which used to take care of its employees. When they offered VRS, I personally have seen, while I was meeting a general manager of a plant of this company, a senior member comes who had joined the plant when this gentleman had joined as an assistant engineer. And this old man says, who had a envelope in his hand, परिवार में जब लोग तकलीफ में होते हैं तो बूढ़े माँ बाप को निकाल देते हैं साहब या बुजुर्गों को सड़क पे छोड़ देते हैं. So when in a family you get into trouble, do you throw out your old members of the family because you have a shortage of resources? And this gentleman could not see him in his eyes because he later on told me that we have spent several lunches together, because this group was a very, very interesting group where workers and the managers used to mix up very, very frequently and in a very friendly manner. So that's one of the basic reasons. So 2 lessons at this stage. One, recessions need to be dealt with, or difficult situations need to be dealt with a positive mind, with certain degree of care and compassion. And the second most important lesson for me at least is business models need to be questioned periodically, because what got you success in the past need not get you success. In fact, it may be a source of trouble in future. Let me quickly add, Maruti Suzuki in this country thrived on the inefficiencies and lack of initiative on the part of its competitors, namely Ambassador and Fiat, Hindustan Motors and Fiat. After spending some years in this country, they themselves forgot to bring new models till Daewoo and Hyundai challenge them. So markets can be interesting. Markets can also be very, very difficult. I'm also saying this is a personal experience. When difficult time comes, and maybe it's a prank played by one of my colleagues, I received 2 requests in last 1 month that from 2 different companies, one from Gulf and one from India. HR people reached me that, Professor, we understand somebody recommended your name, that you are a good motivational talk giver. So can you give a motivational talk to our team? They seem to be in a slightly depressed mood. Now, I looked at my background. By no stretch of imagination, I am a motivational talker. All I have done in my life is I have talked about marketing, management, something about the economy. And I have interest in development, so I have talked about development. So I politely declined. But basically, I'm saying when you are in distress, our problem is we seek any solace, anything. And today, these kinds of people are in demand. Lots of resources are being wasted on them. The 4th point I'm making is, during my active tenure in IIMs, I saw education becoming edutainment. Pardon my saying this, but attention spans came down as generations changed. And professors I found dancing around, using films, using all kinds of tricks of trade, sometimes acting like magicians to somehow keep the interest of the students intact. But I never thought that I'm working in a sector which would be called non-essential. COVID has given me that clarity also now, that for 38 years I served a sector which is considered absolutely non-essential. Let me also share with you, the COVID times requires change, and change is not easy. We keep preaching that change is the only constant, and management of change at one time, and I hope even today it becomes much more relevant, is one of the required, in my opinion, inputs in any management institute. But it is easier said than done. This is the time when people will look for. But at least my personal experiences, and I'm talking about this educational sector, that there are certain principles which companies live by that should not be treated as a football which you easily kick around. Your core should remain, and then you look at the change which is basically helping you becoming agile. I mean, that's my learning. This is again in a slightly non-serious manner I am sharing. When COVID problem started, and I see that tendency in lots of people today. I spent my first 2 years of schooling happened in my village school in Bihar. We used to drink village well water. I have traveled all over this country, stayed in small places, drank water at railway stations from their taps. So I thought there is so much virus already inside that it's like a unreserved railway compartment, my body. So any virus which approaches the fellows from inside will say, go ahead, no space here. But then I was reminded of this famous Kannada thing, Swalpa adjust Madi. And I felt that this virus may say, COVID may say, Swalpa adjust Madi and may enter. So my learning is, you may have arrogance of all kinds, that I am young. Whole lot of these data floating around suggest that only people above 50 or less than 10 are vulnerable. But please remember that when these kinds of things happen, it doesn't come with announcement, and particularly this asymptomatic kind of a thing. So my learning is one has to treat it with caution. Prevention is better than cure. This is, again, people who looked at marketing positively, and these are not marketing people. These were people who were basically with economics background or governance background. They saw two roles for marketing, and I'm pitching it in that context for our COVID in marketing times. One is they found why poor remain poor, and this is we are a poor society, because their aspirations themselves are low. They do not aspire for higher level of consumption, higher standard of living, and you can still see that. Huzur Mai Baap. I mean, the millions of workers losing their job, walking hundreds of kilometers and pleading with police, getting beaten, and yet that citizenship, self-respect, very, very rarely was reflected. So we are still a low aspiration society, but from consumption angle, aspirations have risen. The second thing that economic development is helped through marketing is fulfilling those aspirations by designing, delivering, pricing products and services which meet those aspirations. Now, my experience or my understanding is, in this country, we have done well on the first one. That means we have been able to raise the aspirations. If you look at today, people are looking for convent schools, English language education for their children. Even the poorest are willing to pay slightly higher fees for that. Currently, if you look at for online, I see people from the poorest strata searching for mobile phones, smartphones and things like that, because somebody has not bothered that online classes are not poor friendly. But that's the point I am making. We have not been able to perform so well on the second front. That means we have not been able to be successful on fulfilling those aspirations. Time has come, and this is again very, very critical in COVID times and post-COVID, that do we need to question this aspiration, consumption-driven, materialistic, capitalistic model? If you have a smaller car, go for a bigger car. Where is the end? If you have a smaller house, you can keep going for villas and multiple villas and things like that. So we need to question this kind of model. Not that all consumption is bad, not that all aspiration is bad. That's why I said that aspirations have to be there, but one needs to be careful. Is our GDP-driven economic model still relevant? Do we need to look at happiness and well-being as other metrics? In our neighborhood, Bhutan beautifully changed the rules of the game. While we still get treated as a developing country, Bhutan created this gross national happiness. In fact, Bhutan is very close to us. Buddhism drives that country. India is one of the largest contributors to Bhutan's happiness, and yet we remain unhappy. Why not look at their model and figure out how do we focus on happiness and well-being rather than simply more and more consumption and GDP growth? I'm also raising an issue that does per capita consumption make sense except for essential and quality of life goods? The basic issue I am raising, and this I have been raising for the last 25 years in this country with policymakers and with business people. Business people do not like it because they would like to have as much consumption as possible. Simple example I am giving. In a city like Bangalore, people or companies creating buildings with glasses all over, preventing fresh air to come in, preventing lights to come in, and then consume huge amount of electricity in the name of air conditioning and lighting. Does that make sense? About 10 to 11 months of the year, this city is naturally air conditioned. Yes, for 2 months, we need to have some options, and there are technological options available. So similarly, I say this whole indiscriminate growth of mobile phones. Some of us will know, or most of us should know. In our neighborhood, Bangladesh, somebody developed a community mobile phones model. This was the Grameen Bank promoter, Dr. Mohammad Yunus. The basic thing was, normally a widow in a village or a lady in a village is made a mobile phone operator. She keeps 10, 15, 20 mobile phones at her kiosk. Charging and all that is her problem. Capital investment comes from the company. Anybody who needs to use it can borrow it for use. You can return it back. There is a small price for that. Now, basically, I have maintained that ownership need not be important for lots of consumption. Access is important. And this is what I am hinting at. For a country like ours, if we had robust public transport system, personal transport will not be required. So these traffic jams, this huge amount of pollution that we are having, and these huge imports of petroleum products. Currently, I understand, again, this data sometimes is questionable. Roughly about 10% of India owns personal four-wheelers. US is close to 90%. Now, should we go towards the US model? Doesn't make sense. And we, in fact, most of our people cannot afford it. And in COVID times, we have lived without transporting ourselves. And I'm talking to several people through this mode. Mind you, before COVID happened, I hope you know, multinational companies had this practice of conference calls. IT sector, it's very common. Why we did not look at that model for education or health or for that matter, other things. We could have stopped a whole lot of wasteful movement, right? Similarly, working from home. Why do we need to have so much of office space? Today, companies are releasing 25%, 30% of their space. These are things that I'm talking about. That huge amount of things have come per capita. And problem of our country is we are a huge country, huge population. Any figure you put in the numerator and then you put our population in the denominator, it doesn't make sense. So that's why I'm saying, except for food, water, essential things basically, and services, and certain quality of life things like health, education, and we need to question. It doesn't make sense. Most of our companies, and I hope I am not wrong, there are people who can question me, unfortunately are efficiency focused in their business model. That means, how do I improve my output per unit of input? My submission is it's time for a relook. COVID has forced us to not only cut costs, but question some of our non-value adding activities. And that's where I maintain that effectiveness, viability of all stakeholders, and sustainability need to get priority. Let me very quickly clarify. The difference between effectiveness and efficiency is, first, I need to figure out what is the right way of doing something. And then we need to figure out how do I do it more efficiently. So while we are transporting something, one way of looking at it is how do I reduce the cost of transportation? The other way of looking at it is why do I need to transport? Today, people are talking about 15-minute cities. That means most of your services or what you need, your workplace and all that, you should be able to either use a bicycle or on foot, you should be able to reach that place. Avoid as much of this wasteful transportation and other things as possible and waste of time. Now, these are issues which become very relevant when we are in trouble. And maybe these are the times when we can bring about these changes because, let me quickly give you an example. I had interest in non-conventional energy right from the beginning. I was with IIM Lucknow at that time. This was unfortunately that post Ayodhya debacle 92. 3 months of continuous curfew. And we were trying all kinds of means to promote smokeless chula, solar cookers, and so on and so forth, solar water heaters. This crisis where cooking gas supply became a huge issue, there was a huge shortage, resulted in huge purchase of non-conventional energy material from UP, Non-Conventional Energy Development Authority. And once you buy it, once you experience it, tendency is to continue. And tendency is also to become an advocate for these kinds of products. So difficult situations many a times help change behavior in a relatively simpler manner than a so-called easier situation. is our assumption about insatiable consumer desire and unlimited resources is still valid. Second one, absolutely no, everybody is clear that natural resources are limited. People talked about what is happening in Antarctica and other places, but now you can see what is happening in Bangalore. And my simple analogy of environment is we do not appreciate it when somebody talks about environmental pollution. But when I use this analogy, that suppose your friend bought a air conditioner, he or she puts it in his or her room and exhaust is in your room. How will you feel? Will you allow that to happen? Now that's all, because the so-called open air is nobody's business, so we don't care. And all of us are looking at it. So first point, we don't need now evidence. Insatiable consumer desire. See, these both economists and psychologists tell us that there is a limit. There is a fatigue that happens. So once consuming, we realize that we need not consume more of it. So human tendency is to look for new things, but after some time, like children get bored with these new things. How much of a particular kind of food you can consume? So we keep moving from one to the other. So supply driven. So one needs to work out on the both sides, and that's why I'm saying that consumer is demonstrating fatigue, and environment and society both are protesting vigorously. So we need to look at it carefully. This is a sensitive political issue, but I wanted to make this a statement. While demonetization, a man-made crisis, and COVID, one doesn't know whether it is yet to be out. Investigations are on by WHO and others, whether it is man-made or it is God's act or natural act. Made a large number of us stand in queue and get disciplined. It brought out both the best and the worst in us. Will our faith in exchange mode still prevail, or many will move towards beg, borrow, steal mode? It was heartbreaking to see some of these families which would have afforded at one time full meals and other things, standing for 4 hours, 6 hours in queues for getting basic khichdi during this lockdown period. During demonetization, all of us stood in queues for long times for borrowing, withdrawing our own money for 4,000 rupees and so on and so forth. Now, as a citizen, sometimes we need to be disciplined, as teachers discipline students. But when you face these kinds of situations, the unfortunate truth is that both the best and the worst in us comes out. And the current situation, if you look at the three other modes that I'm talking about, beg, borrow, and steal, lots of people are on the street. People who used to earn their 2 meals in a decent manner. You can see huge number of rise in vegetable sellers. All kinds of people have changed their vocation. It's not easy. And unfortunately, in our society, it's not so easy to change one's vocation, because there is a issue of self-identity and those kinds of things. I'm worried about, will it lead to certain kind of chaos? I hope it doesn't, but these are possibilities and we need to be concerned about things. Do we need to introspect and rethink our economic and business model? So basically I'm saying, should it be based on responsible consumption, sustainable marketing, and business model which is more egalitarian, humane, and just governance? So I'm basically advocating for that. What should be our during COVID and post-COVID manifesto? But the issue I'm raising is, I have some suggestions on that, that really who will drive that? If the government drives it, we get into a command control economy, which we have faced earlier. We discarded with some resistance. Again, another crisis which happened in 1991 when we were virtually bankrupt. Reforms in our country, in my understanding, have not happened because of the will of the decision makers. It has happened because of certain compulsions. And I see that kind of a compulsion today in our economy. And I hope, because one has to be a perpetual optimist. But who will drive that? My submission will be, together we have to drive it. We cannot leave it to one party, either business or government or certain activists. So consumers and everybody, all stakeholders have to look at it. Very quickly, these are basically, I will highlight some of the issues which we also need to manage time. I see our country as a high potential, many individuals, few consumers, and very few citizens. So we have large number of individuals. I dare say that roughly 40% of India is not in regular consumption mode. And I have been repeating that for last 10 years. Although government data suggests that our poverty line has come down, only 22% were below poverty line as per 2011 census. The government expects that by now 11% or 10% will be the people. But I hope you are also looking at the current set of data. 2 crore people seem to have lost jobs during last shutdowns. 2 crore means if you multiply by even 3, that is the family size, 3.5. So roughly 7 crores. You look at the daily wage, you look at the destitutes. So putting all that together, anywhere, let's take 20 to 40%. They survive. Some of them get 2 meals, some of them get 2 meals plus some cover over their head. But that's not called consumption. Few consumers. We don't have depth in our market. You can see penetration of some of these slightly higher end durables. But basic issue is very few citizens. And I have defined citizens later, but let me articulate at this time. During COVID time, when we behave in irresponsible manner, moving without mask, creating ruckus in hospitals, disturbing people who are serving others, these are all non-citizenship behavior or bad citizenship behavior. So basically my definition of citizenship is obedience to unenforceable. If without supervision we can work, if without supervision we can follow traffic rules, if without supervision we will not put waste outside our homes, we segregate waste without penalties, without supervision, then we are citizens. And that's a huge issue that we have. And this situation has again brought forth those problems. We need to work on it. Huge disparities leading to dysfunctional conflicts and aggressions. Income and wealth distribution in this country, you will have data. I am not going to show it here. I have that with me. Roughly using the income tax data, if we take it and say somebody increase the income tax, please look at that carefully, because I have looked at that carefully in the last about 10-15 years. I have worked on this kind of field. Roughly 2.5 to 3 crores only pay tax. People file returns with 0 taxes because through various exemptions, I managed to get rid of taxes. Roughly about 11% of the fellows who end up paying personal income tax contribute something like 90% of the income tax. So it shows clearly, again, there are people who escape this, evaders and all that. If you add all that, even then this is not a great story. So we have a huge issue. And please appreciate why I'm highlighting this. Currently, there is a huge talk about demand stimulus. And mind you, marketing is about stimulating demand. Now, demand happens through discretionary income, not through the regular income. Regular income goes, if it goes in essentials, large part. I hardly have anything to spend. And this is one of the critical issues in our market. And this is basically because of factors which I will mention subsequently. Market, non-market, multiple pulls and pressures. Basically, what was free at one time has become, you can see even in villages now, so-called RO water being sold. at one time villages had their ponds, they had again not necessarily clean water. In some cases, piped water is going, but not in all the villages. In poor localities, you can still see dirty water being used as drinking water. But what was a non-economic commodity has become an economic commodity. On top of that, courtesy COVID, if I don't have income and my cost of healthcare and other things is going up, I have difficulty in managing. Resource abundance yet deficit, periodic surpluses and periodic shortages. Onion is a very good example. Currently, government put a ban on export. There's a huge road there. Basically, most of these things, middlemen are the manipulators who benefit. I will not say more. And this is in difficult times, hoarding, etc. happens. So marketing has a role to play in this time to keep the customer confidence and make sure that these essential or near essential consumption items are made available and accessible to the customers at affordable rates. Unorganized market leading to issues of inefficiency and inequality. Now, first thing is unorganized sector is in huge trouble as of today because it is linked with organized sector. Both are in trouble. A lot of people have lost job. But the inefficiency that I'm talking about the productivity issues, I'm talking about the quality issues, I'm talking about the hygiene issues. I'm also talking about the scale issues in organized sector. And it is leading to huge amount of inequity. One has to be careful because that is the largest sector which offers employment in this country. Now people talk about VUCA initially being new normal. Why I repeated this thing here is VUCA is basically a short form for volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous environment. Basically, if you look at poor, if you look at unorganized sector, if you look at farmers or agriculture in this country, they have been facing VUCA for all the time that I have studied these sectors. So somebody saying in 2008 or 7 that VUCA is the new normal, to me was a big surprise. Currently, people are basically talking about uncertainty, but COVID has brought in all these four with a multiplier. And this has huge implications for our management practices. Let me quickly move forward so that we can also go to the manifesto. Extremely value conscious customers, but values declining in the society. You can see that in terms of current things going on in terms of what is happening with regard to media, what is happening with regard to drug consumption. Even in COVID times, somebody managed to siphon off money from all the places, Ayodhya Trust, and our SBI is so generous that if for any customer it would have happened, they take a huge amount of legal recourse. But here they refunded because everybody is afraid of Lord. This part I'm slightly, these are political things, lip service to inclusiveness, who will include whom? Basically, citizens have to include themselves. If somebody says, I will empower you, that's the arrogance of power. Who are you to empower me? I am empowered through the constitution of this country as a citizen of this country. So those issues we need to, someday we have to behave like citizens and self-respecting citizens and demand certain services which currently are denied. And we feel that somebody is obliging us by offering these services. Blind imitation of Western consumption patterns and managerial practices. You can see it all around us. Blind race for rankings, Western certification approvals. When we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, we need to look at some of these issues. That yes, while we need to integrate with the world, why are we blindly looking at some of these things? Issues of need versus greed. Mahatma said that there is enough in this world for meeting the needs of the people, not the greed of the people. This is much more relevant in today's time. I am a votary for equity, not for equality. God has not made us equal and we will never become equal. Somebody will be rich, somebody will be relatively poor. But the treatment that I deserve, the principles of transparency, fairness, I expect everybody to be treated as a citizen. Then responsible production and consumption chain versus per capita, I have discussed, sorry, this is a repetition. not taking away from the future generations. In fact, basically, we are already consuming a large part of what our grandchildren should have consumed. That's the tragedy of today. This is just, everybody is familiar. I was looking at the latest data, but that's not available. This is somewhere around 2012 kind of a data. So today it will be much worse. 12% of the world population in North America and Western Europe accounts for 60% of private consumption expenditure. This figure has gone up. As against 1.9 hectares of productive land availability per person, we are already using 2.3 hectares. An average American uses about 9.7. Mind you, we are below about 2 in India. And people are already shouting at us that why global food prices are going up, because Indians have started consuming more food. Somebody has to tell them the truth. But a Scandinavian economist, I forget his name, somewhere around 98, 99, made a beautiful statement and very, very valid statement, which is again very relevant in today's context. I dread the day when India and China achieve even 50% of consumption standard of North America. This world may be destroyed. So blind imitation doesn't make sense. We need to have our own business models. And while getting into that business model, let me basically segregate. Problem with our policy making and lots of our even academic discussion and economic discussions, we do not distinguish between these three categories. So when we look at manifesto for consumers or customers, I divide them in three categories, and this has come from some other scholars. I will not, don't have time for getting into the references. So first category is consumer, mostly autonomous. When I say consumer is king, not necessarily. In most cases, you will realize you or me are not king, but many of us do not know what is good for us. And more so the educated amongst us. If you look at the wasteful consumption which is happening amongst the educated. So even while we articulate that consumers per se, for things that they know or they're familiar with, there should be allowed freedom, we say no, it needs to be restrained somewhere. Next category is client. We become clients when we go to certain service providers. So I'm using the context of health, education, legal services. The students are not customers of professors or institutions. They are clients at best. When we go to doctors, we don't tell them what they should prescribe. When we go to an advocate, we share our problem. He or she decides which legal issues and how will he frame the cases and arguments and things like that. As a citizen, I said my definition of citizenage, which comes from Nani Palkiwala, obedience to unenforceable. Let me quickly give you an example. One of the best experiences and memorable experiences of my teaching life. While I was teaching marketing first year, first course in IMB, first term, 2-3 students midway 3-4 sessions into my course. And I used to discuss more about values and other things apart from the basic context of marketing. So somewhere halfway through the class, they raise their hand and say, Professor, you talk about trust, which is critical for customer relationship, but we feel you don't trust us. I was shocked. I was taken aback. I said, tell me, where have I demonstrated distrust? They said, why do you invigilate? Invigilation means you think we are cheats, and that's why you want to supervise. Mind you, I took time from them because you have to discuss in your system. I took permission from the postgraduate program chairperson, and two faculty members took up this challenge. Only exam of my lifetime where we distributed the question paper, we distributed the answer sheet, we put drinking water in the room, and we asked all invigilation staff to move out. And we said, we will come after 3 hours. Mind your own business. Mind you, not a single guy or girl went to the toilet, not a single movement. Right in the beginning, people took extra seats, those who needed it. And the norm they had developed was, if you have to go to the toilet, you have to submit the paper. And when you evaluate these papers, you realize whether some cheating or copying had happened or not. But this was first year. Second year, when I challenged this group, they said, stakes have become very high, Professor. We will not be able to enforce norms. I was sad as a professor. But these are some unique experiences of citizenship values. Citizens have both rights and duties, and as I said, one of the major problems is we don't have too many citizens. Now, coming very quickly to the business models, I say business models need to be reinvented, focused on effectiveness, viability for all, and sustainability. What do I mean by all? Currently, if you look at, if I'm a large company, I call it Matsya Nyaya prevailing. I do not pay my suppliers. I try to delay the payments to my distributors wherever there are claims because I can dictate terms. Now, that's not fair business practice, and that's not fair even to the customer, because whosoever is shortchanged ultimately shortchanges the customer and the company. So viability for all in this chain and sustainability. And I'm saying just efficiency won't help. Yes, you need to be efficient, but first be effective, ask right questions, and then for those things become efficient. Atmanirbhar should mean globalize without victimizing or getting victimized. Atmanirbhar is not, in my mind, closing the economy and trying to be suboptimal and accepting lower quality products. Do not just imitate, innovate. Frugal and incremental innovation is not inferior. Too much of choice creates confusion. See, basically, we are buying technology left, right, and center. What to me makes sense is relevant technology, which is relevant to our context. And that's where frugal, affordable kind of a thing is not bad, provided it's of decent quality, it is safe. So simple, robust, durable products. See, at one time we created proliferation of products in the name of choice. I'm submitting no, time has come when business has to look at simple, robust, durable products or services which are affordable and accessible. That is the business model which this part comes. Today, if you look at, we have created huge wage islands. The US difference, somebody has cited, is 1:300 between a lowest wage employee of the company and the chief executive. In some cases, 1:1100. So these are not sustainable. And unfortunately, we are blindly copying these things. Particularly in times of trouble, I have appealed to the top management and senior management to take greater cuts, make sure that lower levels get their due. We are already sitting on huge number of temporaries. Roughly, you will know that in 4-wheeler, 3-wheeler companies, 20%, 25% are temps who barely get 10,000, 12,000 rupees. If the same fellow gets regularized, you get 30,000 plus. Now that's not equitable, that's not fair. And this is not happening for the initial 1 or 2 years as apprentice. This is prevailing for decades. So we are sitting on virtually a powered keg. Here is the time to correct some of these things that we have created in our economy. Culture, identity, and values may be 3 pillars of sustainable management. Again, big words. Basic issue I'm saying is we need to create a customer-friendly, employee-friendly, environment-friendly culture. We need to thrive on creating an identity for ourselves. That gives us a sense of pride. Certain values we need to practice, because business without values, to me, is begging or stealing. But we must practice what we preach. This is one of the greatest problems that we have. Again, marketing has used branding as an excuse for fleecing customers. I advocate no. Branding is an assurance for quality or being safe. And here is a time when we need to, you will find a whole lot of patients not getting proper care, medicines being priced. There are concerns about the vaccines. We need to be careful on those. Managing cost, availability, affordability, and accessibility makes much more sense. This is my suggestion about the business model. Power, politics, PR, publicity, and people become the most important piece. You can see today what kinds of tools are being used to influence customers and others. So finally, manifesto for governance. Basically, I'm saying government has to stimulate demand, put money in consumers' hand with incentive for spending. Very interesting suggestion came. If you put money in customers' bank, they may save it, but you have to create coupons or something with a validity date so that people come in the market and buy. Otherwise, if demand doesn't go up, our economy will not pick up. And from this level to pick up, it requires extra push. and long-term incentives or some concessions doesn't help. Differentiate consumers, clients, and citizens. They need to be treated differently. This I have articulated earlier. I'm not getting into details here. Anxious and uncertain future facing citizens require assurance from more credible sources. The unfortunate thing today is most of the communication that we are getting with regard to COVID or government policies either come from politicians or bureaucrats, and unfortunately both these sources have lost credibility. In fact, somebody says that weather forecasters have now got better respect than COVID forecasters. So when we are anxious, when we are uncertain, our mind is not stable, we need assurance. Otherwise, dissonance happens. We need to be careful in terms of which are the sources which are credible. Professionals can do a better job here. Political manifestos, in my opinion, are the most deceptive communication. So one has to be careful that why credibility has been lost. Anxiety leads to both rumor mongering and seeking rumor. You can see that happening all around you. There's a lot of research which has happened on this because lots of disasters happen across the world. So we need transparency and accountability. Data using POTA stands for pulled out of thin air. When somebody says because of lockdown, so many lives were saved or so many positive percents did not happen. I mean, one needs to be careful on some of those points because you further lose credibility. I'm submitting to government, consider being a facilitator. It's time when somebody says smaller government and larger governance. Yes, it's time to practice, become a facilitator, become a fair regulator and provider of last resort. And enact to act, not to deceive. See, problem with lots of our acts is when government enacts, the will to put it to practice many a times is not there. And I'm also submitting, consider gross domestic happiness and gross domestic well-being, which already is being advocated across the world now in the growth metrics. So GDP can also be one of the metrics, but it should be one, should not be the most important. I will be concluding in 3-4 minutes. Is that okay? Promote responsible business practices and responsible not crass capitalism and materialism. It may require persuasion and gentle nudging, not coercion. Sorry, this some additional word has come. This should be somewhere else. Move for an assured minimum quality of life for all, more equitable society. Let me basically tell you, when you say build a healthier, happier Anandamay India, late President Kalam had a very interesting acronym called PURA. Because of his persuasion, government adopted that program. Provision of urban infrastructure in rural areas. When this was being advocated, I questioned some of the policymakers. It is impossible. We don't have resources. So basically what my advocacy will be, there is an area between urban and rural, which I call as RURBAN. And the current government at one time was pursuing that program. I don't know where it is today. If you can provide, these are basically small towns, district towns, subdivision towns, which I call RURBAN. These are not urban India, although they claim to be urbanized slightly. There, if you have ambulances, you have facilities for movement. People will be better off, services will be there, doctors will be willing to go, educators will be willing to go. So that is what my dream for this assured minimum quality of life for all is. Basic drinking water, health facility, education facility, housing, food. And mind you, on food, basically, I had a very interesting discussion with a nutrition person in this country. Currently, I hope you know, a large number of our children, we say demographic dividend. Almost 24-25% of our children are hugely malnourished or undernourished. Large number are stunted. That means they have not grown to the extent they should grow in terms of weight and height for their age. Now, what kind of citizen they will be? So, basic answer came that while we defined our problem as a food problem in the late 60s and early 70s, we did not define it as a nutrition problem. So this is my basic take on effectiveness versus efficiency. that if we define a problem correctly, even now if we focus on nutrition rather than so-called just filling up the stomach, we have a different hope. In conclusion, basically 3 points I am making. We need marketing Mahatmas, not warriors. Mahatmas are basically who have pulse of the customer in their hand and who are compassionate, who are caring. But these Mahatmas are also fellows for everybody. So it cannot be that we pamper customers and at the cost of companies or government or anybody else. We need a combination of gardeners, farmers, and foresters. See, we keep talking about in management, short term, medium term, and long term. Gardeners have 1 season perspective. Farmers, if you are a sugarcane farmer, you normally have a 3-year perspective. Other farmers at least have 1 to 2 year perspective. Foresters have 15, 30, 40 years. A sandalwood tree matures in about 35, 40 years. Now, this is the kind of 3 different roles that marketers have to perform in leadership roles, where somebody sows today for future. Lastly, I'm concluding with remembering Galbraith. John Kenneth Galbraith was an American early 60s, American ambassador in India. The story goes that he was sitting to undivided Panchayat from Delhi, and he saw at that time, today somewhere in Haryana, a bodily sick at 11 o'clock during the day, sleeping on a charpai. So he stopped his vehicle, went near this gentleman, and through his driver, he started talking to him. He says, Sardarji, why are you sleeping? He says, what else can I do? So he says, Galbraith says, you can till your and finally Galbraith says, you can have then leisure. So this man looks at Galbraith with contempt, and Galbraith was a tall fellow. Sardarji was equally tall. So he says, what do you think I was having right now? So COVID times also gives me, I have seen lots of Indians, corporate sector running around 16 hours in front of laptops or computers. What for? Forgetting family, forgetting their quality of life. I'm saying, let us look back, not necessarily become that Sardarji is sleeping all the time, but sleep has its own virtue. Let us simplify our life and make sure that, see, we work because we can have a good life. If work becomes a life, then the whole purpose is lost. So I am saying we need to examine our basic principles, both as consumer and as business practitioners and as academicians, and propagate right kind of business model, right kind of policy. Thank you. Any questions? I will be willing to respond.
Thank you very much, sir, for enriching all our knowledge here. We have had a fair amount of learning from your session so far. We got a few questions, and then I would be more happy to throw it to you. So the first question is that in the current market scenario, what are the things that marketers need to avoid, in order to be at the wrong place, in fact? Though it is providing a lot of challenging times, what are the preventing measures that a marketer must take? That's one of the questions.
I mean, there are several things, but let me just quickly highlight 2 or 3 things that I will like to prioritize. See, in difficult situations, people have a tendency to exploit others. Like I said, Matsya, big fish trying to eat their small fish. My first submission to any manager, for that matter, not just a marketing manager, is please avoid the tendency to exploit the weaker fellow. If you have guts, fight with a stronger fellow. Okay. So one basic thing I will say what not to do is avoid exploitation of customers who are vulnerable. And you can see that all around us. The second thing for a marketer I'm submitting is, please do not take shortcuts. You will find a whole lot of fake goods, including claimants who claim that it cures virus. All kinds of nutrition-related things are being thrown up at us, Bhaviji, Papad, and all kinds of nonsense. My submission will be, management and marketing has lost credibility for a long time. Marketers should not do. So second thing I'm saying is do not take shortcuts. And the third thing that I am saying is that marketers have a role to build the confidence of the economy and the customers. So our communication, let me just quickly give you an example. Many of you will be seeing one of these insurance companies thing. Now this is basically trying to latch on to a vulnerable situation. I don't mind insurance being sold at this time, but one has to be careful not to exploit the difficult situation, create more anxiety. These will be the three important things I will say marketers should avoid. And always think medium and long term. Okay?
Yeah. So another question that we have is about the leadership in marketing, in fact, one of the questions reads, leaders decide the culture of the organization, and we see huge gap in leaders and pseudo leaders. What should middle management do when stuck with pseudo leader? So maybe we can answer this at the functionary level.
This is a question very close to my heart. Let me very quickly tell you. I believe, and again, there are people who are thumping around being very powerful leaders, both political field, business field, bureaucracy, everywhere. Now, problem that I have seen in this country is many of these people become banyan trees. Nothing grows under a banyan tree except parasites. So this is one variety. The second variety is self-centric, indifferent kind of a leader. You face this variety quite a bit. And unfortunately, in our culture, I have seen chair doing strange things to individuals. Normal individuals become monsters or sometimes completely different when they occupy certain chairs. So yes, I empathize with you. Problem with middle management that is my greatest gross. Most of the middle managers in this country I have seen becoming messengers. Now, if you are a manager worth being called a manager, please assert your role as a manager. Now, I'm not advocating that you should move around. Certainly, I suggested all the time to my students all over, wherever I worked, that do not work for thieves because they will make you in a thief. And as a professional, till I am alive, I can't do anything, but once I die, my ghost will chase you. So I will not leave this earth for some time. But basic issue I'm saying is professionals need to behave as professionals. So as a middle manager, when you face either even so-called, the tyrants as leaders, some banyan trees who are benevolent towards people who suck up to them. But these are people who are basically order givers and they never allow you to develop. You have to have, see, basic issue is you need to practice marketing. And lots of literature is there in marketing and a lot of cases are there, how to deal with a difficult customer. HR people have used it in terms of how to deal with a difficult boss. My submission will be, read literature and books on power. There is a huge amount of literature and basically, I did not expand on that. Politics is defined as game of power, and as a marketing manager, you are supposed to play politics in a positive frame. So what is game of power? Power is you have power over somebody if you can make him or her do what you want him or her to do, with or without that person's explicit consent. So basically a manager's job is to playing the power game with a positive mindset and clear goals. So read power literature and you will find lots of inputs. You can deal with these kinds of leaders through incentive, disincentives. You can deal with some of these leaders through relationship. You can deal with some of these leaders through ego management. You can deal with some of these leaders through knowledge. Normally, if you are at the cutting edge of the knowledge, even these kinds of tyrants respect you because they are interested in using your knowledge. I have seen people getting their ideas implemented, basically passing on their ideas to the bosses, claiming that It is their idea. So when boss gets credit, you should have satisfaction that your idea got implemented, right? If you become selfish, this idea may not be implemented. So if you are interested in getting your idea implemented, hopefully this man will seek more of your ideas, and you also then grow in the organization. And someday when you occupy the chair, keep in mind what not to do. So yes, there are ways of dealing with these kinds of bosses. But the last thing is, if you find that you are being asked to do unethical things, I say as a professional, you have no business accepting this. You should have confidence in your qualifications and your experience that you will get an alternate job which gives you a decent earning. Okay.
Yeah, that was clinical, sir. I mean, interestingly, there are a couple of questions as well on leadership and then governance and all those stuff. Maybe an incitement from the lessons that they have learned through this session. There's one more question, which talks about how unorganized sector has to cope up with the change scenario post-COVID, or during the COVID time now. So especially MSMEs and startups, plus rural women entrepreneurs, how should they cope up with the marketing scenario now? Is a question from one of my colleagues, Dr. Nandishi Remat.
Okay, again, these are fairly questions which will require more time, but let me try to answer with as much precision as possible. Each one of them requires a different kind of a problem, treatment. So let's take first the last one, the women entrepreneurs or the rural women entrepreneurs. Now, again, I go back to the Bangladesh model. Look at the Grameen Bank model. Again, there are parallel models in our country. A whole lot of things are happening with self-help groups and all that, good, bad, indifferent. But basic marketing issue that I see in some of these cases is product design, product quality related issues. Clarity on customer is one of the most important issues. See, people develop certain skills. I have a sewing machine, I sew something, but whom do I sew it for? Quickly, I will give you an example. There was an experiment happening in IIM Ahmedabad. I don't know whether they are still sustaining it. This project site was in Rajasthan called Jawaja. Local leather workers and handloom workers, one was a scheduled caste, both were in fact scheduled caste groups. They were organized to produce a different kind of product. Now, there were women also in these groups. Now, basic issue, my learning from there, I am just sharing with you. IIM Ahmedabad, National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad came together to give them design. Ahmedabad helped them with marketing and finance. Mahindra Group was the facilitator to begin with, and others came in. But the issue that I raised when I studied that system somewhere in the late 70s was these people were made to make, say, camera cases, file folders of good quality leather. Now, these things will sell in institutional markets like Ahmedabad. So for some time, it was easy going because Ahmedabad, you organize a sale in IIM Ahmedabad, in NID, in some of those institutions. But as your production increases, you are then left to the open market. And neither your scale nor your design. I mean, in today's time, you can't compete with these height signs of the world. So one has to be careful what kind of assistance we are providing. At least my way of looking at it was, if we had linked them with local markets, local demand, yes, incomes per unit would have been lower, but sustainability was higher. That is one kind of a thing. Same thing happened with weavers. They were made to weave these woolen kind of dharis and all that. Again, for some time, very interesting income, did not expand to the extent it was expected. So basic issue I'm raising is marketing input for these people is one, bringing clarity on customer, what we talk, simple things like segmentation, targeting, positioning, not in our difficult jargon language, but that clarity that if you do not know for whom you are producing, what it will be used for, you are in trouble. For the MSME, I have a separate this thing. I know 90% of the MSMEs are in trouble, huge amount of retrenchment. Problem is, again, I have been advocating, I have looked at this issue long time back. I also suggested certain things to government, both the state and center at one time. See, these need to be linked with organized sector. That's why, I mean, they are linked informally, but exploitation happens. So somebody has to take care of that. The other kind of a thing is, because of our policies for a long time, we did not allow them to grow, because moment they grow from a small to medium, certain incentives were withdrawn. Moment you move from rural area to urban area, certain incentives are withdrawn. These were bad policies. Some of these have been taken care of. But critical issue on MSME that I have is lack of focus. Basically from marketing angle, I'm saying, and lack of focus on customer, lack of focus on quality. I have seen a lot of people, and I tried to give free consulting. People trying to get with bribing, cheating. These are not sustainable. You can pass on inferior quality product for some time, but that's not sustainable. And I'm not saying everybody is doing that. The second important issue with this kind of a group that I find is they are too much centered on production and finance, and sometimes on personnel issues, which has come down over the last few years. But for production and finance is their predominant focus. Marketing, they think, is basically sales. And sales is linked with distribution, collection, and all that. So one needs to look at slightly differently in these models, depending on, because these are huge varieties. And lastly, coming to the startups, my problem with the startups is, see, if you get free money, or if you get money where funding is the basic objective, you don't build a model. You first need to have a business model. You need to have certain client. So if the idea is to build a business, somehow scale up, get funding and get out of it, it will have a problem. And I'm also saying in this country, failure is not respected. So American model being replicated, that unless you have failed thrice, yes, if you are a rich man's child, you can sustain. But most of these startups are not of that variety. Youngsters with good ideas getting into it, but getting trapped into, and examples of this Flipkart and thing. Believe me, none of these fellows would be existing today if somebody else had not invested in them. These were all loss-making ventures, and people were writing off. If Kishore Biyani had to sell off, I mean, what do we talk about startups? So basically, I'm saying robust business model for startups is a must. Easy funding, easy financing for either seed capital fellows or VCs is a sure prescription for disaster. Again, there are several other issues, but this is where I will stop.
Well, there was a question on something on resource utilization. I mean,
Right.
Fortunately, that got answered in a question. So the participant was talking about there is no dearth of resources outside, and then the challenge is that how to utilize them, how do you allocate the resources at various fronts in the marketing function, and where does it take us to? In fact, there is no demand in the end market. All of us are going through challenging times. The marketer seems to be kind of sandwiched between the two situations. So what's the way ahead for him?
Let me also just add to this that, see, when we talk about resources, one has to be careful. See, this man, our late C.K. Prahlad, he used to beautifully distinguish between an entrepreneur and a manager. In another way, I mean, Peter Drucker did it in a different manner. His basic equation was that managers are normally, they look for resource equity. That means, give me resources, I will give you results. If you are entrepreneurial manager or leader, you first look at the results and then say, okay, with the resources I will start, I will get this kind of a result. I'm not resources starved. I can generate resources if I have a good idea, if I can demonstrate certain kinds of performance. So this I found very interesting and also practical. When I looked at some of these fellows within organizations who have innovated. Quickly, I will give you an example when somebody talked about marketing leadership. Let me quickly, I was reminded of I also call it one of the best gifts that I ever received from one of my students. One of my students from Bangalore, he worked with P&G. He was handling Ariel. Ariel had been recently launched. So he was not responsible for launch, but he was facing post-launch problem. They used to claim that they are superior to Surf Excel, but whenever he used to go to any large retail store and had requested them to stock it at a visible point, they will come back and say, where is the proof? सबूत कहाँ है? आप कहते हो कि ये superior है, लेकिन लोग नहीं मानते. So this man, while coming back from office in Mumbai, he was just passing through in his taxi through some market, saw a large red cloth hung from a cloth shop. He bought 10 meters of this cloth, came home, cut it into 2 pieces, 5 meters each, gave it to his maid servant. He went and bought Surf Excel. He already had Ariel. He said for next 10 days, wash 1 piece of cloth in Surf Excel every day and another piece of cloth in Ariel. And after 10th day, and claim to fame of Ariel at that time was that it keeps the color of the cloth intact. He took these 2 pieces to his boss. He had tagged it and showed it. Here is the proof. Now this resulted in a huge communication from P&G, and some people would be familiar with that. In fact, they conducted a very interesting experiment. They bought few kilometers of this cloth. They hired an independent agency. They recruited an ombudsman, so a retired justice, to oversee these operations so that neutrality is maintained. In this industrial laundry, roughly 5 kilometers each of this red cloth was washed in Surf Excel and another lot in Ariel. And then they cut and pasted it one night overnight on newspapers, on front page, taking that A4 size kind of a thing. Sabut yahan hai. And they made small posters out of it, put it in the shops. Mind you, while this work was in initial stages, and this is my basic issue between that middle manager or the small manager and boss. This young guy went to his boss, who was the category manager or product manager, and said that we need to increase the pricing expenditure 5 times because otherwise we can't sustain the campaign that we are planning. So his boss, and look at it, I mean, I look at it 2 ways. His boss says, go to the chief. Chief is CEO. And I give you freedom to make a presentation to him. If this is your idea, you should get credit. Now, why I said 2 ways is, one way of looking at it is, if boss gets angry, this young fellow will get the bad thing, right? And he may get sacked or he may be put in the bin. If the idea succeeds, boss also gets credit that here is a boss who allowed the youngster to take credit. But good leadership practice, in my opinion, whatever may be the objective. So this guy goes, boss was already somewhat familiar with what was happening, that time chairman of Levers. Before he started his presentation, the man says, last evening, Levers chief called me. He's a friend. And he said, some hanky-panky you people are trying to do. I'm not aware of the details, but my people brought it that you are trying to make some big splurge in the market. But take it from me that if you are doing any hanky-panky, I will drag you to court. He said it in a laughing manner, but I'm telling you seriously that if Levers drags us to court, you will lose your job. So this guy, and look at it, this is communication. And this is my learning from my student. He spontaneously said, sir, if Levers chairman without knowing the details is worried and he already called you, don't you think, do I have to now make a presentation to get 5 times the budget? And the chairman smiles and he says, young boy, you got your day, go ahead. Rest is history. They got huge mileage in the market. So basically I am saying, what was the expenditure? Very little. The initial idea was 10 meters of cloth, that to personal expenditure of this boy. And later on, say 5 kg is not a big amount. But when they put it in the ads, sabut yahan hai. And these retailers put it behind the checkout counter. It generated huge amount of additional trial and repeat purchase. So resources that people talk about, always remember Microsoft started in a garage. Nike did not have resources. Nike source thing, which is valued at a few $100 million, it was created at, somebody says $300, somebody says $10,000. Highest that I have read in literature is $10,000. So if you have creativity, resource, you can leverage, and even real resource you can get. That has been my take. That's why I said I should share this story with you. Okay, sir?
All right, sir. Sir, would you mind taking a couple of more questions?
Yes, tell me.
Sir, we have got a question from Dr. Kamani Dutta, who wants to know that the marketers want to have a long-lasting relationship with the customers, and therefore they go for any type of venture, which makes them lock with the company for longer period of time. This could be, some loyalty programs or such type of program which lock them with the company for a longer period of time. So how long such relationships can go? Is it really a win-win?
No, let me tell you very frankly. I have interest in relationship marketing, but some of these American concepts or which emanated. Mind you, we were traditionally relationship oriented. If people recall, our grocers, even today our friendly neighborhood grocers, know the whole family, their requirement and all that. So as a society, we are relationship oriented. Problem I have is, if you look at the business to business literature, the terminology begins with you are a suspect, then you become a prospect. So I started questioning. See, this reflects the mindset. Moment we talk about lock-in, we try to teach students that you should be customer centric. That means put yourself in the shoes of the customer. So when I put myself as an academician in the shoes of the customer, and I realize that somebody is trying to lock me in, that means he or she is trying to make me choiceless. No, nobody likes to be choiceless. So these terminologies one has to question. So while I am for relationship, and I have been arguing that, look, if everybody was interested always in a choice, the institution of marriage would not have survived. We forego choices in order to marry somebody, right? So economists, when they say that customers always want a choice, no. But what customers hate is a trap. So whether it is marriage, whether it is business relationship, when it becomes lock-in, and I have seen in business to business practices, I design the layout in such a manner that if you have to go to a competitive technology, there is a huge cost involved, right? Now, most customers do not feel happy about it, and they try to get out. Companies try to put, HR people put these so-called bonds, right? I hope you know sign-in bonus came in the industry parlance to take care of these bonds. So my submission is, if I am relationship oriented, the ideal is what I learned in Buddhist literature. They claim that if you really love somebody, free him or her of all bondages. Say they use the analogy of a bird, that if you really love a bird, don't put it in a case. If the fellow loves you and you're compassionate towards it, it will come and sit on your shoulder. Sometimes it will fly off. So you should enjoy seeing a bird flying rather than inside a cage. So I use that analogy that customers should be free to move away, but he or she should value my offering to such an extent that the fellow repeatedly comes to me, and I should give him or her enough reasons. I need to keep innovating, because otherwise relationships become dull. So I believe in that, not trap. I'm saying superior value. I'm careful in using the word incentives, because incentives many a times are so-called. Loyalty to me is that HMB dog. So we don't want the dog's loyalty from a customer. So we have to be careful with our language. But basic issue that we are talking about is, yes, I simplify things for my customer. Nobody likes to search around if I give him or her what he or she wants. So to the extent I am responsive, to the extent I in a sense, anticipate the need of the customer and provide certain value, the fellow will keep coming back to me. You get my point? So I'm using the example. Please look at, see, Saturn is a beautiful brand of General Motors which never achieved its potential. But in Saturn, you will find beautiful examples. I'm just using one example in this context. Saturn salesmen were trained to become consultants to their customers to figure out and advise them which is the best car or best automobile brand for their need. So assess completely the need of a customer and then try to sell them. And there were instances where Saturn salesman told a person that Saturn or General Motors today doesn't have a vehicle which meets your requirement. Maybe Toyota or somebody else has this. Then somebody asked a question that you pay your salesman to sell competitor's car. The manager beautifully answered. He says, you know, courtesy this, how much visibility we got? Most of these customers started putting in, that time internet was just happening in that country, that if you want to buy your first car, the first showroom that you should visit is that of Saturn, because these fellows are not greedy. They try to understand your need and they give you the right suggestion. Now that resulted in huge traffic to Saturn showrooms. And normally, you know, if somebody visits a showroom, there is a correlation between purchase, and not necessarily every customer who walks in buys, but this generated huge amount of credibility. So that will be my way of looking at this issue.
All right, so very good examples to actually understand how branding cannot just be bragging, and then it will be, you know, bridging the gap between rising aspirations and meeting those aspirations, as you have earlier mentioned on. And moving on to the last question, sir, my colleagues have, a couple of colleagues have asked a question, and I'm just clubbing them into one. Yeah. So this pandemic situation has put the tourism industry at the back foot. And another question is all about, you know, how a service marketer can actually be different in marketing the services than the product marketing. And here, you know, we can take an example of travel and tourism industry during COVID times, and then probably this will be the last question for the day.
Let me give you a slightly off the regular example. At one time, this Museum Association of India had a conference in Mysore, and they invited me several years back. Okay. And one of the issues they raised with me was, these were directors of these directors and deputy directors of museums from all over India. So they shared with me the kind of traffic that they were getting, and they were dissatisfied. Typically, school students being forced, they also do not come. If they come, they play around outside. They are not interested in the displays there, and those kinds of things. I thought about that issue, and my submission to them was that, look, if customers do not come to you, there is another way. Go to the customer. Okay. And some of them appreciated that. My basic issue was, if you digitize, and digital things had already started happening in this country. First thing is, many of us do not have time or resources to go there. Yes, sometimes it becomes very boring for children, even for adults, unless you have interest in archives and those kinds of things. So if you create familiarity, it will create certain curiosity. So rather than forcing through schools or through parents, if you create curiosity, if you help them look at certain things, help them do their projects properly in the school, maybe it will generate. And at least what feedback I got from some of these fellows who used this is that it generated some traffic for them. So that is one kind. So I'm saying, even in the tourism context, yes, certain destinations I cannot move, travel was stopped, things are opening up now, but people will be careful. Even today, I see Metro is drawing 35,000 as against some 4.5 lakh or 7 lakh commuters every day. So even in city, people are careful, right? Outside movement, I understand now that at least around Bangalore, many of these destinations are getting full, at least on weekends. But there will be anxiety, there will be issues of safety and security. So linking with services marketing fundamental, what is fundamental between goods and services? We say services are intangible, goods are tangible, right? So what is the problem of intangible? For customers, I need to tangibilize it. That's the fundamental principle that we teach and we practice. That tangibilize the intangible and intangibilize the tangible. That is how customers appreciate it. So in today's time, two things one needs to add. One is that, yes, I already have preference. I have anxiety, whether how will I reach there, whether it is safe. So you can see in certain cases now helicopter services have started. So again, this is for well-to-do. At least in some of the religious places, they have made it slightly more affordable. I'm talking about this, your Vaishno Devi and other places, but not very reliable, and again, very limited numbers use that. But I'm saying 2-3 key points that is critical there is when there is an anxiety and we deal with this so-called dissonance. So I didn't get into too much of detail, but marketing professors, when we teach consumer behavior, that when customers are in anxiety, dissonance happens. Now, how do I take care of that dissonance? There are strategies for that. We need to practice it. And first principle that we need to use is we need to tangibilize the intangible. So Kerala becomes God's own country, but God's own country, if it has to now attract tourists further, it has to do something more to take care of that anxiety. And so some of these fellows are doing it, including going to the extent of managing the complete package. So I will take care of your complete movement, and this is the kind of thing that, and you can see now with these film stars and others going on these chartered flights. Now that is at the higher end. At the lower end, I hope you are familiar with these so-called religious places or Char Dham special and those kinds of things. So at different levels, these packages help, because when I am in a group, and you have examples of these eye care, say Arvind Eye Care, why they created clusters of patients, because I feel higher confidence when I'm in distress with similar others or with familiar others. Now one can learn from some of these things and create cluster tourism, right? So again, these are some ways in which one has to innovate till things become normal. Right, sir?
Yes, sir. All right. With this, we come to the end of a webinar. It's been an incredible session so far from you, sir.
Could you record the session?
Yes.
So
yes,
can you later on send me the recording whenever it is?
Yes, sir. Sure. We would send it across to you.
Thank you. Although I like interaction or interactive kind of a thing, but I enjoyed because they were interesting questions.
Yeah, it's always quite challenging, interacting through online. So offline platform, cannot replace anything.
No, and I'm not comfortable online, but this was interesting, and I particularly liked the questions.
Thank you so much, sir, for the enriching experience. And I'm sure, not just academicians, the marketers, few of them are present here, they would have had fruitful learning from this session throughout. And for that, we are deeply indebted to you for your time, for your valuable lessons. And I, on behalf of my Institute Indus Business Academy, on behalf of our chairman, Shri Manish Jain, the Dean and Director, Dr. Subhash Sharma, Program Director, Dr. Subhendu Dey, and on behalf of my marketing colleagues who are present over here, and on behalf of all my colleagues from other functional areas and our students from, the participants' behalf, we would like to say our deep gratitude for your value, for the time that you have given to all of us today. It has been an enriching experience really well. Thank you so much.
To Mr. Jain and Dr. Sharma.
Oh, yes, sir.
Sir, just one small announcement for the participants. Just please fill up the feedback form. I have put the link on the chat box. Please do fill up about your experiences related to this webinar. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank you so much, participants. Sorry, sir, I lost you.
Yeah, no, so I am exiting now. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
sir.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, all the participants.
Before we end, I just want to make one more announcement to the participants that we are coming with the next webinar in this series on October 2nd. And that will be, Babu sir, will you like to talk about it? Maybe if you can just introduce the topic.
Yes, we have a very interesting speaker again from IIM Bangalore, Dr. Ramesh Kumar, who specializes in branding and consumer behavior. Now he has consented that he would be talking on the digital marketing and consumer behavior. So digitization and consumer behavior is what the topic he is going to deal with, which is going to be quite interesting and really exciting. So we look forward to all of you participating in that webinar as well, and you can get a lot of takeaways in that regard as well. So please do participate in the next webinar. We expect all of you there as well. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, all the participants in and outside of IBA. Thank you so much, Dr. Vaishali, Professor Smita, and Professor Narendra for making this happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Shall I close the webinar, ma'am? Shall I end it?
Yes, ma'am. You can end it now.